We're going to try to take a look today at the maintenance part of the bandsaw. I apologize for the video. The acoustics are horrible in this shop. Everything echoes. So at any rate, we've got noises in the shop. It's a little echoey, but try to bear with me. Basically, in terms of maintenance on this saw, the biggest thing that you have to do as a student is replace a blade. And the blade replacement is pretty simple. The blade replacement may not be because you've broken the blade or it's damaged. It could be that you're cutting material that's either too thin or too thick for the blade that's on the saw. All right, I've got the camera moved up a little bit. This is a little hard filming this by myself. It is what it is. So bear with me. I'm going to open the covers by simply pulling them. There's a Velcro enclosure on here that stops each cover. It's really is just that simple. We're simply going to pull it open. Now, this particular blade is in good working condition, so we're not going to scrap it. And it is also sharp, so I'm going to grab a pair of gloves. And I know I'm half in and half out of the camera, but, you know, not a professional publication. This is just me at school on a Saturday by myself. So I'm going to lift this up to get the blade to clear and lock this in position. And I'll reopen this cover. Now when this is open in the up position, it will self-lock. And inside on that cover, there is a little latch right here that has to be pushed in order to allow it to close. Please don't just push on the cover, you will break something, okay? So please release the latch. On the back side, we have the handle right here. And this is the handle I tell you not to grab. When you lift the saw up, you always grab it from here. I'm simply going to loosen this handle. But as I do, the tendency is going to be for the handle, right now this entire assembly, this moved in, and then now what's going to happen is where it doesn't have the blade pulling on it, see how the handle is backing itself away? These little washers will kind of fall down in off of a recess, so push this in or keep pressure on it. If it comes out too much, the washers can get kind of hung up down there and they're a pain in the butt to line back up. So we don't have to loosen it all that much. You can count the number of turns when you loosen it and retighten it, but honestly I don't think that's necessary. Because you can't count on a new blade tightening exactly the way the old blade did. At this point, the blade is loose, okay? And what's going to happen is, hopefully you can see this, the blade is down in behind this guard, and then when I get way down to the end, it's kind of up again, okay? See, let's see here, the lighting in here is just horrible. But there it is, it's up and down. So if I just try to pull on this, the blade's going to get hung up on this orange guard. Down at the bottom, the blade has to make a transition, and it's actually twisted. That's normal. Okay, that's how most bandsaw blades work, at least horizontals. So we're going to have to push the blade out of the guides first. I'm going to do that by simply giving it a whack on the back here, light little tap, and the blade should pop free. There we go. Again, you want to tap it lightly. If the blade is destroyed, I suppose it doesn't matter. You're going to throw it away anyway, but this blade is not, so I'm going to keep it. Now, at this point, I'm going to set the camera back down, and at the risk of being in my own way, I'm going to attempt to remove this, straighten that thing up without totally blocking the view. I'm going to have a face shield on and gloves. Okay, the reason is that blade can come out and catch you on the brim of the nose and cut your face. Ask me how I know. I learned that one the hard way when I was working in the machine shop. So I'm going to basically grab the blade from up top, and I'm on my knees just so I'm a little bit more out of the way, but I'm going to try to pull the blade so it comes free of this guard up top, and then I'll release it. Okay, don't work your way around in a circle. Just grab the top. Okay, and grab it over here, and then you should be able to get the blade to come off. And I'm going to try to do this and stay reasonably well out of the way. All right, I'm kind of cheating a little bit because I'm trying to stay out of the way, but it started. So normally I would just come in and reach across like so. Now you can see the blade hopefully is clear on the top, and then I'm going to pull the blade out from the bottom. There we go. So this blade is free. If you are only changing the blade for one particular cut or a small number of cuts, and you're going to put the blade that was on it back on, again, this is a 3/4 variable pitch Starrett Versatix blade. Maybe I'm only going to make a couple of cuts. Maybe I'm cutting some stainless steel or some aluminum, and I'm going to put this back on. Just simply set it on the workbench, the table, hang it someplace safe while you're using it. But if it's going to go into storage or scrap, we've got to cut it up. Now this is tricky. Takes some practice, but basically what you're going to do is you're going to twist the blade to get it to coil into 3 loops. And as I turn it slowly, I'm going to get the blade to kind of curl in on itself, and then ultimately it will create 3 loops. The new blade is right here. From the factory, it's going to have a tag on it indicating what it is. That may be ripped off in the process of us handling them in the shop. It's going to have some plastic ties on here. And again, these are the ties that I would use to secure the old blade. If there's nothing available, welding it together is an option. Usually plastic ties, zip ties, something like that will do. I'm going to set these aside. And then these twist ties, once they're removed, we can go ahead and uncoil the blade. Now this has a safety edge on it. I suppose I could just throw it, let it land on the ground, and boing, spring open. But that's not good for the blade. It's not really safe, especially if the blade's been used and there is no safety edge on it. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to do this correctly. All right. We'll see how many takes it takes me to do this so that this is actually on the camera. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the blade in one hand and I'm going to separate it into parts with my other hand. So I've got 2 loops in one hand and 1 loop in the other. Now this blade has already done what I want it to do. I have this loop is opened up in the center, and I'm referring to, see if I can do this loop right here. So what I want is I want that loop to open up, and I'm going to bring that up to my other hand, okay? Sometimes you kind of get it backwards, and it doesn't do that. So the other loop is not in the middle, it's actually on the bottom. It's kind of captured here. So it may take you a couple of just tries to sort out which of the 2 you hold in your left and which of the 2 you hold in your right, but you will eventually get an open loop in the middle. Once you have that, you're going to hold that loop in your free hand. So I've got an X in my right hand and I've got the loop in my left. And now I can let go of the other 2 with my right hand. This will open the blade. Now it is like this. And then finally, I can open the blade up. Now, when the safety tab is off, when the blade's brand new, this can easily hit you in the face. So we want to be careful about that. I will put my face shield on before I put the blade back on the saw, because again, if it pops off the guides, it's going to smack me in the bridge of the nose. So I would normally have safety glasses on in the shop. Saturday, there's literally nobody in the building, and it's wicked humid in here, so my glasses are fogging up. So for the purposes of the demo, I'm just going to use a face shield, okay? But at this point, we can remove this plastic strip. Now this plastic strip is almost never in one piece. So there's the short little piece that comes off. I'm just going to toss it on the floor for right now. And then the other piece will come off. Not all blades come with this. The Starrett blades I buy do. I'm sure Lennox blades do as well. You go buy a blade from the hardware store, it may or may not have a strip like that. So the next thing we have to do is we have to figure out, is the blade going in the right direction? So basically, if we look at the blade, the smooth part of the blade needs to be up against the back part of the saw. So if I take the blade and I hold it with the teeth towards me, and I stretch it out a little bit, I can look at the teeth and I can see that they actually aim to my left. Well, on the saw, the blade runs to my right, So that means the blade is effectively inside out. I have to flip the blade inside out in order to use it, because I can't turn it around to get the teeth going in the correct direction, because then the teeth would be against the inside of the saw, and they would ultimately be pointed up instead of down, okay, when I flip it over on the bottom. So to flip it inside out, I'm just going to hold the blade out, okay, and I'm going to roll it with one hand and allow that blade to flip over, okay. Because of our Ellis bandsaw, it's hinged on the right. Almost every single time you get a blade, I will say every time, unless it's a used blade that we're reusing, you're going to have to flip it. It is what it is. So under normal conditions, I would have flipped this before I put the safety tab off, because I know it's backwards, because our saw cuts this way. If it cut this way, the blade would be correct, okay? So it's just it is what it is. Different brand saw, the blade would probably be right. I have the back edge of the blade, the non-cutting surface, away from me as if it was on the saw, and the teeth are now going to the right, which is the correct orientation. So we're going to bring this over to the saw, and we're going to start putting it on. So I've got my blade here. I've got it orientated in the correct direction. Again, if I hold this up, so that the blade, the non-cutting edge is against the back of the blade, I kind of imagine the blade twisted around. I can see that the teeth are going in the correct direction, and hopefully you can see that on the camera as well. So I'm going to put the blade on by starting at the bottom. I'm going to put my face shield down because I don't want to get hit in the face, and I'm going to rest the blade on the inside of this cart, this enclosure. Then I'm going to bring the blade down here, and I'm simply going to push the blade on over the wheel. Now at this point, guys, there's nothing holding this on except a little bit of light friction. There is a cleaning wheel right here. Sometimes this can get in the way. Just kind of flip it up. Make sure that the blade is clear as you're tightening. So once the blade is on, I'm simply going to tighten the hand wheel down until I get my alignment. And I'm going to take the camera freehand for this. We're going for a ride. So the wheel right here, I'm going to start tightening. Now, if you had previously counted the number of turns, which I recommend doing that, if you're not comfortable with this, but if you started counting the number of turns, then you could count those turns back. But what we're really watching for is we're trying to get the blade to tighten up on the top and watch it come down off right now it's touching this tube, right? If I loosen it, it's up, now it's down. And we just want to tighten it until it's basically parallel to the orange safety guide, right? It's going to get a little bit tight. At that point, the blade itself has got to be flipped. Now, right now, the blade is just caught between here. It's not lifted up quite high enough. There we go. She's up now. And I'm going to make sure that this is not holding the blade. It was a little bit. And again, I'm going to come back up. This is now a little bit loose. I'm going to tighten the wheel. Again, I'm just turning this with one hand while I watch on the other side, okay? And I can feel that coming down so that it's parallel. So the blade appears to be a uniform distance above this orange guard all the way down. Additionally, the blade appears to come straight off the top of this without a curve up. All right, so I've got my gloves on, and we're literally going to have to twist the blade and get it to pop up in the guides. There's very little clearance on the guides, so the blade's really got to be straight to get up in there. So you're going to have to turn it and kind of pull, okay? And this is, some people this is uncomfortable, but I'm just literally going to rotate the blade, and I'll feel it. Right, the back just popped in. Now the front, same thing. And I can get up underneath here. There's it in, and then I can simply pull the blade up. So now we're ready to set the tension on the blade. To start with, I want to just note that the blade should be on this wheel so that there's about 1/8 of an inch from the bottom of the gullet to the side of the wheel. Right now we've got a lot more than 1/8 of an inch. But we're going to make sure that the blade is just kind of on. We're going to let it run in a little bit. So what we're going to do is I'm going to come around to this side. I'm going to hit the start button, and then I'm going to stop it with this a couple of times real quick. As I do that, so it's going to be start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. And as I do that, you're going to see the blade kind of, even itself out on the wheel. It will probably go backwards. It'll probably go backwards quite a bit because it's not really fully tight yet, but you're going to see the blade move. So here we go. Couple of quick bumps. So now, normally if I'm alone, I would come around and see what just happened. The blade has moved in. I can see that clearly. It's actually gone inward a little bit. If I bring the camera back up, we can notice that the blade is much closer to where it should be. But for all I know, the blade is still moving inward with a couple of taps. So I'm going to do it a couple more times. And it appears like it may have moved in slightly, but it hasn't moved a lot. So at this point, I'm simply going to start the saw and let it run. And then I'm going to come around and adjust the tension until the blade is where it's supposed to be. So I'm going to start it up. Now I'm not worried it's going to come off, but I can see, and I know it's hard to see with the camera running, but the blade is not really where it's supposed to be. So I'm simply going to take this hand wheel, let me zoom out. I'm simply going to put my hand on the hand wheel and I'm going to adjust this tension. I got to let it run. It takes a few seconds. If you watch right here, you'll see a shiny spot go by. Right there. Right there. That's the weld. That's where the blade was welded together. So you got to let it run at least that much time. And right now the blade looks like it's where it wants to be. I think if I tightened it a little more, the blade may actually come out further. So we're going to leave it right there. That's about 1/8 of an inch. Okay? And the blade is roughly where it should be. Okay? So when I tightened it, I got lucky and tightened it pretty close to where it should be tracking. But it should be hanging out over the rubber part of the wheel, top and bottom. If it's not, and you can see where there's wear inside here, it will rub against the back, or the teeth, if they're on the actual tire, the rubber part of the wheel, the teeth, because they're actually jagged, they're angled left and right like shark's teeth so that they cut a little bit wider than the blade is, they'll chew that up. At this point in time, we're simply going to close the covers. Again, this latch has a little notch in it. When I lower this down, you can kind of see that shape. I'm going to drop this cover down, secure it. Again, it's just Velcro. The other cover will generally come up on its own. Give it a wiggle. There it is. Close that. Again, just Velcro. And now we're ready to do a blade break-in. So folks, once the blade has been installed, we're not just going to start cutting full force. The blade is sharpened from the factory. It has a honed edge that is extremely sharp. And if we start cutting immediately, we can get the blade, a slight twist on the blade, and what will happen is that honed edge will wear on one side more than the other, and the blade will start to cut crooked. So for the first roughly 10 minutes of the blade's life, we're going to operate this at a relatively slow speed. All right, we've got our blade on. We are ready to do the break-in period. Now I'm not going to film the whole thing because it's 10 minutes long, but essentially once the blade is installed, we want to make sure that we are feeding this down slowly. For slowly, what I'm going to recommend is opening this up to a certain position. So here we go. We're going to start the saw. Whoops, emergency stop. Start the saw. And again, I'm going to open this up just a little bit. Halfway really between this nut adjustment screw and that little knob reference to the black mark. Okay? And then we're going to let that feed down through. It is slow, but it's the difference between having the blade cut straight or not.